The Galactic Council meeting hall was enormous. Representatives from dozens of different alien species sat in floating chairs, arranged in a perfect circle. Each species had earned their place here through centuries of proven wisdom, advanced technology, or military might. At the very back, almost hidden from view, sat the human representative. Ambassador Sarah Chen looked small compared to the massive Kronar warriors with their thick armor and glowing red eyes. She seemed fragile next to the tall, elegant Etherians who floated instead of walked. Even the insect-like Hive Queen's drone towered over the human woman. After 50 years in the galactic community, humans were still considered the baby species. The other council members had good reasons to think this way. When humans first made contact with galactic civilization, Earth was a mess. Wars were ending, cities were rebuilding, and humans seemed amazed by even basic alien technology. They asked for help with everything: medicine, energy, food production, space travel. Humans needed guidance like children. In council meetings, humans always voted for peace. When the Kronar wanted to attack the rebels on Sigma 7, humans suggested talks instead. When the Etherians wanted to claim the mineral-rich asteroid belt of Tau Ceti, humans proposed sharing agreements. Other species found this amusing. Humans were so innocent, so hopeful that everyone could just get along. Humans, the Kronar general had once said, are like small animals that think all predators are just misunderstood. The council had laughed at this. Even Ambassador Chen had smiled politely. Today's emergency meeting was different. The Zephyrian Empire had done something that shocked even the hardened council members. 3 days ago, their massive fleet had surrounded Kepler 442b, a small human farming colony. The Zephyrians were known for being aggressive, but they usually picked on species their own size. Kepler 442b was home to 2.3 million humans. They grew food and raised livestock. They had no weapons, no military bases, no defenses at all. It was the kind of peaceful colony that humans seemed to love building. The perfect target for someone wanting to send a message. The attack had been brutal and quick. Zephyrian warships had destroyed the orbital stations first. Then they landed troops. The colonists tried to surrender. But the Zephyrians were not interested in mercy. They killed anyone who resisted and took the rest as slaves. Emperor Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire made sure the whole galaxy watched. His ships broadcast the attack on all frequencies. The galaxy saw human farmers begging for their lives. They saw children crying as soldiers dragged their parents away. They saw homes burning while Zephyrian troops celebrated their easy victory. The message was clear. Humans were weak. Anyone could take what they wanted from Earth's colonies, and the humans would do nothing about it. Most council members expected Ambassador Chen to ask for help. They thought she would beg the council to send peacekeepers, or maybe pay a ransom for the prisoners. Some of the kinder species were already preparing to offer aid. The Etherians had started calculating how much food Earth might need if more colonies were attacked. When Ambassador Chen stood up to speak, the chamber grew quiet. She was a small woman in a simple blue uniform. Her gray hair was pulled back, and her face showed no emotion. She walked to the center of the chamber, where the speaker's platform waited. "Honored council members," she began, her voice calm and steady. 3 days ago, the Zephyrian Empire attacked our colony at Kepler 442b. They killed innocent people and took 2.3 million human beings as slaves. Several council members nodded sadly. The Mercantile Union's representative was already preparing trade agreements to help Earth recover. The Hive Queen's drone buzzed sympathetically. Emperor Vextar has declared this attack to be justice for humanity's interference in Zephyrian expansion plans. He claims humans are too weak to deserve protection under galactic law. More nods. This was exactly what everyone expected humans to complain about. Then Ambassador Chen said something that made the entire chamber freeze. The Zephyrian Empire has 72 hours to return every human taken from Kepler 442b. They have 72 hours to surrender all military personnel involved in war crimes against civilians. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is a statement of terms. The silence that followed was complete. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the laughter started. It began with the Kronar general. A deep rumbling sound that shook the air. The Zephyrian representative, A proud warrior named Commander Thokmor started laughing so hard he had to hold his sides. Even some of the peaceful species couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it. Humans? Making demands? Humans couldn't even protect one farming colony from a single Zephyrian fleet. Now they were threatening the entire Zephyrian Empire? It was like watching a mouse threaten a lion. "Did you hear that?" Commander Thokmor managed to say between laughs. "The little human thinks it can give orders to the mighty Zephyrian Empire. What will you do if we refuse?" called out the Kronar general. "Send us angry messages? File complaints with the council?" Ambassador Chen waited for the laughter to die down. Her expression never changed. When the chamber was quiet again, she spoke one more time. 72 hours, she repeated. Then she turned and walked out of the chamber. The laughter started again as soon as she was gone, but it sounded different now. A few council members noticed that the human had not explained what would happen after 72 hours. She had not threatened war or demanded council intervention. She had simply stated a deadline. Commander Thokmor was already sending messages back to Emperor Vextar. The Emperor would find this very amusing. The humans were even more pathetic than anyone had imagined. They could not even make proper threats. As the council session ended and representatives returned to their ships, none of them suspected that everything they thought they knew about humanity was about to change. In exactly 71 hours and 43 minutes, the galaxy would discover what humans really were, and they would never laugh at Earth again. The message reached Emperor Vextar while he was enjoying dinner in his palace on Zephyr Prime. Commander Thokmor's report made him laugh so hard that he choked on his drink. Humans making demands, setting deadlines, it was the best entertainment he'd had in years. "Send them another broadcast," he ordered his communication officer. "Show them more of their precious colonists in chains. Let them see what happens to species that challenge the Zephyrian Empire." Within an hour, new footage was being transmitted across the galaxy. Human prisoners from Kepler 442b were forced to work in the mining operations on Zephyr Station 7. Children cried for their parents. Adults collapsed from exhaustion. The message was clear. This was the fate of any human who dared to resist. The footage reached Earth and was broadcast on every human world. The reaction was exactly what the galaxy expected. Protests in the streets. Angry speeches from politicians. Demands for action from crying families. Humans were emotional creatures, and they were responding exactly as predicted. What the galaxy did not see were the other reactions happening in places they knew nothing about. Deep beneath the surface of Luna, Earth's moon, Admiral Marcus Rivera stood in a command center that did not officially exist. The room was filled with screens showing data from across human space. Officers moved between workstations, their faces grim but focused. "All teams report ready, Admiral," said Colonel Wei Zhang, his aide. "Operation Shepherd is green across all theaters." Admiral Rivera had been waiting for this moment for 30 years. Since the day humans first learned they were not alone in the universe, Earth's governments had prepared for this possibility. The peaceful farmers and philosophers that other species saw were real, but they were not the whole truth. "Confirm the deadline," Rivera said. 17 hours, 32 minutes remaining, sir." Rivera nodded. "Signal all assets." The 72-hour grace period was for them, not us. Begin. Phase 1. Across 3 star systems, humans who had been living normal lives for decades suddenly revealed their true purpose. The friendly human merchant who had been selling farming equipment on Zephyr Prime for 20 years disabled the planet's orbital defense grid with a few keystrokes. The human doctor who ran a clinic on Zephyr Station 12 released a computer virus that crashed the station's communication array. In the Zephyrian home system, a human family that had been running a small restaurant near the military headquarters did something that changed everything. They activated a device they had been carrying for 15 years. Every faster-than-light communication relay, within 100 light-years, simply stopped working. The first sign that something was wrong came when Zephyrian Command tried to contact their outer fleet. The signals never arrived. Then they tried to reach their orbital defense platforms. Silence. One by one, every connection to the outside universe went dark. On Zephyr Prime, Emperor Vexitar was still laughing about human threats when his communication officer approached with a worried expression. "Your Majesty, we have lost contact with the outer system defense grid. What do you mean, lost contact? All signals are dead, sir. No response from any platform. The Emperor frowned. Send a ship to investigate. We tried, Your Majesty. The ship launched, but we lost all communication with it after 2 minutes. For the first time since the human deadline had been announced, Emperor Vextar felt a cold touch of worry. He ordered an immediate status report from all military installations. The reports that came back made no sense. Zephyr Station 7, the massive military depot that supplied 3 systems, was completely dark. Not destroyed. The automated systems would have detected an explosion. Just silent. Zephyr Station 12, where human prisoners were being held, had gone offline 30 minutes ago. The last transmission had been a routine status update. Then, nothing. The orbital defense platforms that protected the home system were not responding to any signals. Ships sent to investigate found empty space where the platforms should have been. No wreckage. No debris. The massive defensive structures had simply vanished. This is impossible, Commander Throckmore said when he arrived at the palace. Our platforms were the size of small moons. You cannot just make them disappear. But they had disappeared. Across 3 star systems, every major Zephyrian military installation had either gone dark or vanished completely. The proud fleet that had conquered worlds found itself scattered and alone, unable to communicate with command or each other. The worst part was not knowing how it had happened. There had been no massive space battles. No invasion fleets. No armies landing on Zephyrian worlds. One moment everything was normal. The next moment their entire military structure was gone. Emperor Vextar called an emergency meeting of his war council. The room that had once echoed with confident plans for expansion, now filled with confused whispers and frightened speculation. Reports are coming in from across our territory, General Mordak announced. We have lost contact with 60% of our military assets. Our fleets are scattered and operating independently. Our communication network is completely compromised. How many ships have we lost? The Emperor demanded. That's the strange part, Your Majesty. As far as we can tell, we haven't lost any ships. They're all still out there. They just can't talk to each other, or to us. The Emperor stared at the tactical display showing his empire. Red marks indicated lost communication. Yellow marks showed installations that were still responding but reporting problems. Green marks showed fully operational assets. The display was mostly red and yellow. The green marks could be counted on 2 hands. In 12 hours, General Mordak continued, humans have somehow crippled our entire command structure without firing a single shot that we can detect. As if summoned by those words, a new signal appeared on their emergency channel. It was a simple text message in perfect Zephyrian script. You have been isolated. Your military assets are under observation. Your communication networks are under our control. Return the human prisoners immediately. Or, Phase 2. Begins in 6 hours. The message was signed with a single word. Earth. Emperor Vextar felt his blood turn to ice. The species he had considered barely capable of spaceflight had just demonstrated the ability to cripple a galactic empire in half a day. They had done it so quietly and efficiently that his military leaders still did not understand what had happened. Your Majesty, Commander Throckmore said quietly, perhaps we should consider returning the prisoners. The Emperor looked around the room at his generals and admirals. These were warriors who had never retreated from any enemy. Now they were looking at him with fear in their eyes. Never, he said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We do not surrender to farmers and philosophers. The message system chimed again. Another text appeared. Phase 2 begins now. Outside the palace windows, the lights of the capital city began going out one by one. The power grid of Zephyr Prime died section by section. First the government district went dark, then the military bases, then the commercial areas. Within 2 hours, the entire planet was running on emergency power only. The proud capital of the Zephyrian Empire looked like a dying star. Emperor Vextar stood in his palace, now lit only by backup generators, and watched his empire crumble in real time. Reports flooded in from across Zephyrian space, each one more impossible than the last. On Zephyr 7, the food distribution centers had stopped working, not destroyed, just stopped. The massive machines that fed millions of citizens were intact, but would not respond to any commands. Workers tried manual controls, but the systems remained dead. On Zephyr 12, the water treatment facilities had shut down. Clean water was no longer flowing to the cities. Backup systems activated automatically, giving the population maybe 2 days before serious problems began. But the strangest reports came from the military bases. Weapons stockpiles were being emptied, but not by explosions or raids. Security cameras showed Zephyrian soldiers taking weapons to designated areas and simply leaving them there. When officers tried to stop this, the soldiers acted confused. They could not explain why they were doing it. "It's like they're sleepwalking," General Mordak reported. "Our own troops are disarming themselves, and they don't know why." The truth was more disturbing than anyone imagined. During their 50 years in galactic society, humans had not just been learning about alien technology. They had been studying alien psychology. They knew exactly how different species thought, what they feared, and how their minds could be influenced. The weapons being moved were not random. Human operatives had spent decades identifying key individuals in the Zephyrian military. Soldiers who were respected by their units, who had influence over others, who could be subtly guided to make choices that seemed like their own ideas. Dr. Sarah Kim had been studying Zephyrian psychology for 25 years. She worked at the University of Human Cultural Exchange on Zephyr Prime, a research facility that everyone assumed was devoted to peaceful academic study. Her real job was mapping the social networks that held Zephyrian society together. Zephyrians base their entire culture on strength and honor, she had explained to Admiral Rivera during the planning phase. If you can make them question whether their leaders are strong enough to protect them, the society will start to collapse from within. Now her research was being put to use. Carefully crafted messages were being sent through Zephyrian communication networks, not propaganda or obvious lies, but simple facts, presented in ways that made people ask questions. A message would appear on a military base's internal network, showing power consumption data. Just numbers. Nothing threatening. But Zephyrian soldiers would notice that their base was using 50% more power than normal, and they would wonder why. When they asked their officers, the officers could not explain it, because the extra power was being used by human monitoring systems they did not know existed. Another message would show shipping records. Food deliveries to military bases had increased by 30% in the past month. But no one could remember ordering extra supplies. Soldiers began to suspect that their leaders were hoarding resources while civilians went without. The most effective messages were the simplest ones. A single number would appear on communication screens across a Zephyrian base. The count of how many human prisoners were being held in Zephyrian territory. The number decreased every hour, but no official announcements were made about prisoner releases. Soldiers began to whisper among themselves. Were the humans rescuing their people? How were they doing it? If humans could reach prisoners in the most secure Zephyrian facilities, what else could they do? On Zephyr Station 9, Captain Veltar commanded a force of 10,000 elite troops. His base was considered the most secure facility in Zephyrian space. When the first human prisoner disappeared from his detention center, he increased security. When the second disappeared, he locked down the entire station. By the end of the day, all 43 human prisoners were gone. Security cameras showed nothing. Guards remembered their normal patrols. But somehow every cell was empty. The station's systems showed no signs of intrusion, no evidence that anyone unauthorized had been inside. Captain Veltar called Emperor Vextar directly. "Your Majesty, this is impossible. My station is surrounded by space. The only way in or out is through docks that are constantly monitored. No ships have docked here except our own supply vessels." The Emperor had heard the same story from 12 other installation commanders. Prisoners were vanishing without trace. Weapons were being moved by soldiers who could not explain their actions. Critical systems were failing for no apparent reason. "Send scouts to patrol our space," he ordered. "I want to know where the human ships are hiding." The scout ships launched and immediately ran into problems that made no sense. Their navigation systems would work perfectly in some areas, then become completely unreliable in others. Engines would lose power for no reason, forcing ships to drift until backup systems kicked in. Communication equipment would receive strange signals that interfered with normal operations. Commander Jack Van led one of these scout patrols. His ship was the newest in the Zephyrian fleet. equipped with the most advanced sensors available. He was confident he could find whatever the humans were hiding. 6 hours into his patrol, his ship's main engine stopped working. Diagnostics showed no problems. The engine was in perfect condition. It simply would not start. While his engineers worked on the problem, sensors detected another ship approaching. It was small, sleek, and moving faster than anything in the Zephyrian fleet could manage. It appeared on sensors for exactly 30 seconds, then vanished completely. During those 30 seconds, Jekvan's ship received a data transmission. The message was simple. Your prisoners are safe. Your weapons are being secured. Your empire is being preserved. Surrender now, and your people will not be harmed. Jekvan tried to respond, but the other ship was gone. His engineers finally got the main engine working. But when they tried to return to base, they discovered that their navigation charts had been changed. Every star map in the ship's database now showed human space as extending across the entire galaxy. It was psychological warfare on a scale that the galaxy had never seen before. Humans were not trying to destroy the Zephyrian Empire through brute force. They were systematically destroying the confidence that held it together. Reports reached the Galactic Council from sources throughout Zephyrian space. Other species had representatives and observers in the system, and they were sending back information that shocked everyone. The Etherian observer reported, "Human capabilities have been severely underestimated. They appear to possess technology and organizational abilities far beyond what they have previously demonstrated." The Kronar military advisor sent this message. Zephyrian Empire military effectiveness has decreased by 80% in 48 hours. No major battles detected. Recommend immediate reassessment of human threat potential. The most disturbing report came from the Mercantile Union's trade representative. Human operatives have been embedded in Zephyrian society for decades. Current operation suggests planning timeline of 20 to 30 years minimum. Human integration into galactic community may have been preparation for exactly this scenario. Ambassador Chen had not returned to the council chambers since delivering her 72-hour ultimatum, but her ship remained in orbit around the council station, and representatives from other species found themselves watching it with new eyes. The ship looked exactly like every other human vessel. Simple, functional, with no visible weapons or unusual features. Now they wondered what it was really capable of. If humans could make an empire disappear without firing a shot, what could they do to individual species who got in their way? Emperor Vex Tar made one last attempt to salvage the situation. He sent a message on all frequencies, broadcast to the entire galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire does not surrender to terrorists. These human attacks on civilian infrastructure are violations of galactic law. We call on the Council to condemn this unprovoked aggression. The response came 12 hours later, transmitted on every screen in Zephyrian space simultaneously. It was Ambassador Chen, speaking from her ship, with the flags of Earth and the Human Colonial Union behind her. Emperor Vex Tar speaks of unprovoked aggression while holding 2.3 million human civilians as slaves. He speaks of galactic law while broadcasting the torture of children. The 72-hour deadline has passed. The Zephyrian Empire has chosen to continue holding human prisoners. Phase 3 begins now. The message ended, and across Zephyrian space, every government building, every military base, and every communication center received the same simple notification. You have 24 hours to evacuate all civilians from the core system. After that time, Zephyr Prime will be quarantined until prisoner release is complete. No one in the galaxy understood what a human quarantine meant. They were about to learn. The evacuation order sent panic through Zephyrian space. For the first time in their history, civilians were fleeing their own core system. Ships packed with families left Zephyr Prime by the thousands, heading for the outer colonies and neighboring systems. Emperor Vex Tar watched the exodus from his palace and felt his empire dying. Each ship that left carried people who would never trust their government's ability to protect them again. The foundation of Zephyrian power had always been the promise of safety through strength. Now that promise was broken. "Your Majesty," General Mordak said, entering the throne room with a tablet full of reports, "civilian evacuation is at 60%. Our military forces are requesting orders. Should we prepare for orbital bombardment?" The Emperor studied the tactical displays. His remaining fleet was scattered across 3 systems, unable to coordinate effectively because humans controlled their communication networks. Even if he could gather them for a final battle, what would they fight? Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Human attacks came from everywhere and nowhere. "How many prisoners do we still hold?" he asked. "Approximately 400,000, Your Majesty. The others have somehow been extracted from our facilities." The Emperor's blood ran cold. In 5 days, humans had somehow rescued 1.9 million prisoners from the most secure installations in Zephyrian space. They had done it without anyone seeing how, without leaving evidence, without anyone understanding what had happened. "Your Majesty," Commander Thakmor arrived with more disturbing news. "We have detected ships approaching the core system. They're not showing up on normal sensors, but our gravitational detectors are picking up massive distortions." Through the palace windows, the Emperor could see something that chilled him to the bone. Stars were disappearing, one by one. The familiar constellations that had watched over Zephyr Prime for 1,000 years were being blocked out by invisible objects. The quarantine had begun. Admiral Rivera stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, humanity's flagship that had never appeared on any official registry. Around him, a fleet of 40 ships moved into position around the Zephyrian core system. Each vessel was equipped with technology that other species had never imagined. "All stations report ready, Admiral," Captain Foster announced. "Quarantine field generators are online. Initiate containment protocol," Rivera ordered. Around Zephyr Prime, space itself began to change. Invisible barriers formed at the edge of the system, created by manipulating gravity fields in ways that should have been impossible. Any ship trying to leave would find its engines working normally, but somehow it would never reach the system boundary. Space would fold back on itself, trapping vessels in an area they could enter but not exit. The Zephyrian fleet tried to break through. Admiral Koltar led 50 ships in a desperate charge toward what his sensors said was empty space. His navigators confirmed they were moving at full speed directly away from Zephyr Prime. After 6 hours of travel, they should have been light years away. Instead, they found themselves back where they started. "This is impossible," Admiral Koltar reported to the Emperor. "We have traveled in a straight line for 6 hours. Our instruments confirm we maintained course and speed, but we are in the exact same position we started from." Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the physicist who had developed the quarantine technology, watched the Zephyrian attempts to escape with professional satisfaction. Her team had spent 30 years figuring out how to create localized space distortions large enough to contain an entire star system. "They're trying to understand it with conventional physics," she explained to Admiral Rivera. "But they don't realize we're not just bending space. We're creating a closed loop. From their perspective, they're traveling normally, but space itself is curved back on itself. They could travel for 1,000 years and never reach the boundary." Inside the quarantine zone, the psychological pressure was becoming unbearable. Zephyrian civilians who had not evacuated found themselves trapped in a system where the rules of reality no longer applied. Ships could leave but never arrive anywhere else. Communications could be sent but never reached their destinations. Even light from outside the system was being bent back, making the stars themselves disappear. The effect on Zephyrian society was exactly what human psychologists had predicted. A culture built on conquest and expansion could not survive being caged. Protests erupted on every inhabited world. Military units began deserting their posts. Some officers started openly questioning whether the prisoners were worth this nightmare. Emperor Vextar called another emergency session of his war council. The room that had once been filled with proud warriors now held broken leaders who jumped at shadows. "Options," he demanded. "We could try to negotiate," suggested General Mordak. "Perhaps if we returned half the prisoners." "Never. We do not negotiate with terrorists." "We could attempt to contact other galactic powers," Commander Thakmor offered. "The Kronar might intervene if we offered them territorial concessions." Admiral Rivera had anticipated this possibility. When Zephyrian communications tried to reach outside the quarantine zone, they found their messages being intercepted and replaced. Any calls for help were edited to make them sound like routine status updates. To the outside galaxy, the Zephyrian Empire appeared to be operating normally. The isolation was complete and terrifying. The proud empire that had conquered 3 systems was now trapped in a bubble of twisted space, cut off from the universe, slowly consuming itself from within. On the 7th day of the quarantine, something unprecedented happened. A group of Zephyrian military officers approached the palace under a flag of truce. They were not rebels or deserters. They were decorated veterans, loyal soldiers who had served the Empire faithfully for decades. Captain Mordeth spoke for the group. Your Majesty, with respect, this war cannot be won. The humans have demonstrated capabilities beyond our understanding. Our people are suffering while we hold prisoners who may not even be worth the cost of this conflict. Emperor Vextar felt his authority crumbling. When even his most loyal officers were questioning his decisions, the Empire itself was dying. You would have me surrender to farmers? He asked. Your Majesty, Captain Mordeth replied. These are not farmers. I have fought in 12 campaigns across 6 systems. I have faced every major military power in this sector. I have never seen anything like what the humans have done to us. They have crippled our entire civilization in 1 week without firing a single shot. As if summoned by those words, every screen in the palace activated simultaneously. Ambassador Chen appeared, speaking from the bridge of her ship. Emperor Vextar, your people have suffered enough. Your military officers understand the situation even if you do not. The quarantine will remain in place until every human prisoner is returned safely. Your empire can end this at any time. The transmission continued with something that shook the Emperor to his core. It was a live feed from inside his own detention facilities, but instead of showing human prisoners in chains, it showed empty cells, every single one. As you can see, Ambassador Chen continued, all human prisoners have now been safely extracted. We are no longer asking for their return. We are demanding the surrender of those responsible for war crimes against civilians, starting with yourself. The transmission ended, leaving the throne room in stunned silence. All of them? The Emperor whispered. Every prisoner? General Mordak checked his tablet with shaking hands. Reports from every detention facility showed the same thing. Empty cells, confused guards, and no explanation for how 400,000 people had simply vanished. Emperor Vextar realized that he was no longer fighting to recover prisoners. He was fighting to avoid being arrested himself. But how could he resist an enemy who could reach into the most secure facilities in his empire and make people disappear? Outside the palace, crowds of Zephyrian civilians were gathering. They were not protesting for war or demanding victory. They were calling for surrender. They wanted their emperor to end the nightmare that had trapped their entire civilization. For the first time in his life, Emperor Vextar felt fear, not fear of death in battle, which would have been honorable, but fear of an enemy he could not understand, could not fight, and could not escape. The humans had not just defeated his military. They had made his entire empire disappear, while leaving everyone alive to witness it. Tomorrow, he would have to decide whether to surrender or watch his civilization destroy itself from within. Either way, the Zephyrian Empire, as he had known, it was already dead. The Galactic Council emergency session was called for the 10th day after Ambassador Chen's original deadline. Representatives from every major species had demanded answers about what was happening in Zephyrian space. Reports had been flooding in, but none of them made sense. The Etherian delegation had sent scientific observers to study the Zephyrian quarantine. Their ships approached the system boundary and found nothing. No barriers, no force fields, no visible technology. But when they tried to enter the system, they experienced the same spatial loops that trapped the Zephyrians. Space itself had been turned into a prison. The Kronar military had attempted to contact their Zephyrian allies through quantum communication networks that should have been impossible to intercept. Every message was delivered normally, but the responses that came back were not from the empire they knew. Zephyrian officials sounded defeated, broken, begging for the war to end. The Mercantile Union's economic analysts had detected massive disruptions in trade patterns throughout that sector of the galaxy. Entire supply chains that depended on Zephyrian space routes were collapsing, but when they tried to offer alternative arrangements, they discovered that all communication with Zephyrian territory was being controlled by unknown parties. When the session began, the council chamber was filled with an atmosphere of nervous tension that no one had ever experienced before. Species that had viewed humans as insignificant were now watching Ambassador Chen's empty chair with something approaching fear. The Hive Queen's drone spoke first, its translated voice carrying undertones of deep concern. We request immediate clarification of human military capabilities. Our analysis suggests that everything we believed about Earth's technology level was incorrect. The Etherian representative floated forward, their crystalline form shimmering with agitation. Our scientists have examined the spatial distortions around Zephyrian space. The technology required to create such effects is beyond our current understanding. How long has Earth possessed these capabilities? Before anyone could respond, Ambassador Chen entered the chamber. She walked to the center platform with the same calm demeanor she had shown 10 days earlier. But now the entire council watched her in complete silence. No one laughed. No one whispered. The woman they had dismissed as a harmless idealist now commanded absolute attention. "Honored council members," she began, "I am here to report the conclusion of humanity's response to the Zephyrian Empire's attack on our civilians." She activated a holographic display that filled the chamber with images from across Zephyrian space. The representatives saw empty detention facilities, abandoned military bases, and civilian populations that looked traumatized but unharmed. All human prisoners have been safely recovered. Emperor Vextar and 347 military officers responsible for war crimes against civilians are now in human custody awaiting trial. The Zephyrian Empire's military capabilities have been neutralized. Their civilian population has been unharmed. The Kronar general leaned forward in his massive chair. "What happened to their fleets?" "Our intelligence reports suggest you destroyed hundreds of ships." "We destroyed no ships," Ambassador Chen replied calmly. "All Zephyrian vessels remain intact. Their crews are alive and unharmed. We simply removed their ability to operate as a coordinated military force." "How?" demanded the Etherian representative. "Our observers detected no major space battles, no orbital bombardments, no invasion fleets. How does one neutralize an empire without fighting?" Ambassador Chen smiled for the first time since the crisis began. "You assume that fighting requires destruction. Humans have learned that sometimes the most effective way to win a war is to make your enemy realize they have already lost." The holographic display changed to show statistical data that made every representative in the chamber feel cold fear creeping through their minds. Duration of conflict: 9 days, 14 hours, 37 minutes. Human military casualties: 0. Human civilian casualties: 0. Zephyrian military casualties: 0. Zephyrian civilian casualties: 43. All from accidents during voluntary evacuations. The silence that followed was absolute. An entire galactic empire had been defeated, with 0 casualties on both sides. It was impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. The Mercantile Union's representative found his voice first. What did you do to accomplish this?" "We used the resources we have been building for 50 years, Ambassador Chen replied. "When humanity first joined the galactic community, we realized we needed to prepare for the possibility that peaceful coexistence might not be enough. We have been ready for this moment since the day we left Earth." Commander Thokmor of the Zephyrian delegation, who had been silent throughout the session, stood up slowly. His proud bearing was gone, replaced by the posture of a defeated warrior. "Honored Council," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was present when Ambassador Chen delivered her original ultimatum. We laughed at her. We thought humans were weak, defenseless farmers who would beg for mercy." He paused, gathering strength to continue. "In 9 days, they dismantled our entire civilization without killing a single soldier. They rescued prisoners from facilities that should have been impossible to penetrate. They trapped our entire home system in twisted space that our greatest scientists cannot understand. They turned our own people against us by simply showing them the truth about what was happening." The chamber remained silent as Commander Thokmor delivered what amounted to his species' surrender. "The humans are not farmers," he continued. "They are not philosophers. They are predators who have been pretending to be prey for 50 years. Every species in this council should understand what that means." Ambassador Chen watched the effect of these words ripple through the chamber. The Kronar delegation was quietly reviewing their own expansion plans, calculating how many of their target systems might have human merchants, or colonists, already in place. The Etherian representatives were reconsidering trade agreements they had thought were in their favor. Even the Peaceful Healing Corps was wondering what other capabilities their human medical partners might possess. The Zephyrian Empire will be restructured under council oversight. Ambassador Chen announced. Their military will be disbanded and rebuilt as a defense force only. Emperor Vextar will stand trial for war crimes. The civilian population will receive aid as they transition to a new government. She paused, letting her next words sink in completely. Humanity seeks peace among the stars. We have always sought peace. But we have learned that sometimes, the only way to achieve lasting peace is to demonstrate that the alternative is far worse. We trust the Council will remember this lesson. The holographic display showed one final image, a star map of the galaxy with human space clearly marked. But now, instead of the small territory that everyone thought humans occupied, the map showed human presence on hundreds of worlds, across dozens of star systems. Observers, merchants, researchers, medical personnel, cultural exchanges, all the innocent interactions that other species had welcomed for 50 years. The message was clear. Humans were everywhere. They had been everywhere for decades. And if any species threatened human civilians again, they would learn what the Zephyrians had learned. The Hive Queen's drone spoke in a voice that carried new respect and barely concealed fear. The Council acknowledges humanity's response to Zephyrian aggression. We request clarification of Earth's future intentions regarding galactic security. Our intentions remain unchanged, Ambassador Chen replied. We seek peaceful cooperation, fair trade, and mutual understanding with all species. However, attacks on human civilians will be met with immediate and decisive response. The methods demonstrated against the Zephyrian Empire are always available. She began walking toward the chamber exit, then turned back for one final statement. The council session when Emperor Vextar first attacked our colony, several of you expressed concern about humanity's military capabilities. You wondered how we would defend ourselves. I hope your questions have been answered. Ambassador Chen left the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the absolute silence. For several minutes, no one moved. No one spoke. No one seemed to know what to say. Finally, the Kronar general broke the silence. Session adjourned, he announced, his voice lacking its usual confidence. As representatives filed out of the chamber, the galaxy's balance of power had fundamentally shifted. The species that had viewed Earth as an insignificant newcomer now understood that they had been sharing the galaxy with apex predators disguised as pacifists. In the corridors outside the chamber, whispered conversations carried the same themes. Military expansion plans were quietly shelved. Trade agreements with human space were elevated to highest priority. Diplomatic protocols were updated to ensure that human interests were carefully considered before any major decisions. The Etherian representative sent an urgent message to his government. Recommend immediate technological cooperation agreements with Earth. Their capabilities suggest they are several centuries ahead of our projections. The Kronar general contacted his military high command. All territorial expansion plans involving systems with human presence are hereby cancelled indefinitely. The Mercantile Union's delegate began drafting exclusive partnership offers that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. The galaxy had learned what humans really were. And for the first time in galactic history, the Galactic Council had been left truly speechless. Not from admiration, but from the terrifying realization that they had been sharing the stars with sleeping giants who preferred peace but were prepared for anything. The age of underestimating humanity was over. The age of very careful respect had begun.